Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The JAYREELZ podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. We're officially smack dab in the middle of the summer season. 7 weeks ago was Memorial Day. 7 weeks from today will be Labor Day. I hope you're enjoying this time because it is zooming by, as we all know. And if you haven't, I suggest you get out there and start doing so because this time isn't coming back, people. Get out there, make the most of it, live it up, which will be a theme later on in the podcast. So let's get it, as I have a few things to share on what the sports universe has to offer, as this is the JAYREELZ podcast with your host, JAYREELZ. For my first timers, welcome aboard. And for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle, or even as early as last Thursday, I welcome you guys and gals back. But some housekeeping to begin. It is summer, as I mentioned. It is hot. We need something that's crisp, refreshing, that tastes good, and it's actually good for your gut. Yes, that being OLIPOP soda. Good for your gut? What do you mean, JAYREELZ? It's a prebiotic soda, which means that it's better than anything else that you could buy out there in the market. It has no artificial ingredients, non-GMO, no genetically modified, anything that goes into this beverage. 4 grams of sugar per serving. Not only that, you'll get your classic flavors. So if you're just a cola guy or root beer, cream, that's fine. You could certainly go along with those, but they also have some very interesting flavors for the summer. That being watermelon lime, banana cream, tropical punch, which happens to be my favorite. So don't look any further. Go to drinkolipop.com. Use the promo code JAYREELZ to get 15% off. JAYREELZ, JAYREELZ. 15% off of your order. What other deal can you get that's better than that? Especially if you're going to go to a supermarket. So please, go to the website, type in that promo code, and get as many cases, as many cans as you possibly could for your boy, as I'll get a cut of that. One more time, drinkolipop.com. JAYREELZ, 15% off of your order. I would greatly appreciate it, and so will the people at drinkolipop.com. So I had to get that out of the way before we begin. And I'm going to start off a little bit differently here. I will get to the baseball. Obviously, that'll be the bulk of it. Some NBA news, especially surrounding Jalen Brunson and what he did over the last few days, as well as some sad news. I know the NFL has had a lot of these deaths recently. We had the 4th round pick of the Vikings perish in that accident about 10 days ago or so, and then, of course, a couple of others, including one yesterday in regards to a former player. But for tennis, which I want to get the 3rd Grand Slam in, and if you didn't watch yesterday on ESPN, and I'm sure that you've heard of or maybe have gotten on your radar over the last 24 hours of a player named Carlos Alcaraz. And I've talked about him in the past, and I talked about how this guy is going to be the next face of tennis. And what we've seen here, now at 21 years of age, and this year, not only winning the French Open about 5 weeks ago, but now is also a back-to-back winner of Wimbledon. A guy that, I get it, if you're not into tennis or if you're a casual sports fan, you wouldn't know who this guy is if he fell on you. But you certainly have to pay attention because this could be a guy that, although has a very long career ahead of him, and we certainly can't forecast how his career is going to go as far as health, first and foremost, situations in life. If he gets married, as we all know, things could change once you go down the aisle and exchange wedding vows and with babies and things of that nature. Not to say that his career will be in jeopardy or will certainly go down the tubes, but that will play a huge part in his determination and his dedication of his sport. Just look at Derek Jeter. He's a prime example of a guy who waited till after his career. Not to suggest that Alcaraz should do that, but this is a guy that if he is healthy, and he has had some health issues here early on in his career, but I tell you, youth and just being able to be resilient as far as your body and maybe to a certain extent what's in between his ears, this is a guy that is on the fast track to being not only a Hall of Fame caliber player, but could be, when it's all said and done, among the ranks of the guy he beat yesterday and won Novak Djokovic, Rafael Nadal, his fellow countryman, Roger Federer, etc. Because his game is as explosive, but also at the same time shows a lot of finesse with those drop shots, a lot of power, forehand, serve. The guy has it all. The complete package, everything and anything that you want to see in a tennis player. And as we saw there in the semifinal on Friday against Daniil Medvedev, he did drop that first set, came out a little bit sluggish, was slow, but then just steamrolled his way through that match where he won 6-3, 6-4, and 6-4. And for Medvedev, who I talked about on Thursday, was a guy that I wanted to see whether or not, and he has beaten Alcaraz in the past, so it's not as if that happens to be his kryptonite. But I wanted to see Medvedev take that next step. For a guy that has won a major tournament, the 2022, I believe, US Open, and for a guy that does know his way around semifinals and finals, I wanted to see him go up against the big, bad, young stud Alcaraz to see whether or not he would be able to outlast him. And he certainly got off to a good start. Maybe it was more Alcaraz not being on top of his game, or like I said, getting out of the gate rather slow before he was able to dial it up. And then we saw him just blitzkrieg, through that semifinal match. And then for Djokovic, who just did in his own right with Lorenzo Mazzetti, the Italian, his first time there, and disposing him in 3 sets, which set up the matchup based on last year, second year in a row, where both heavyweights are going to go at it. And what you saw there yesterday was just dominance. And granted, that third set was certainly challenging. It was certainly tooth and nail. Novak did whatever he could to scratch and claw to try to put any pressure on the young Alcaraz. But as he jumped out to 6-2 and 6-2 after the first 2 sets, and that third set was certainly back and forth. In fact, Alcaraz had a 5-4 lead and 40 love with championship point right at his fingertips. And for Djokovic to get out of that and push it to a tiebreak set, and Djokovic certainly showed the champion that he is, that he wasn't going to let up, he wasn't going to give up, but it was certainly going to be a tall order for him to come back 2 sets to love against Alcaraz, who was flying high. Maybe if this was a couple of years ago, as Alcaraz is trying to find his footing, maybe we could look at that as a situation where Djokovic would take advantage of the young guy, maybe more so what's in his chest and maybe what's in his mind, and try to outlast him that way, as well as his talent. But there was no way that he was going to be able to do so after Alcaraz in that tiebreak set was able to get the points that he needed, and for Djokovic to try to get that volley in his last gasp, and it hit the net. And next thing you know, Alcaraz up in arms, racket to the grass surface, winning his 2nd Wimbledon in a row, his 4th Grand Slam already at the age of 21, and only he and Roger Federer have started their careers at this tender age, where he has gone 4-0 in this final setting and has not lost. And we know that Alcaraz won the US Open a couple of years ago on top of the French Open just last month. So now he's going to be going for a 3rd straight at the US Open in Flushing Meadow come later this summer. And what more can I say about Alcaraz? I understand that he is a guy that everybody's going to be gunning for, whether it's the old guard and the one Djokovic, or a lot of the newer players, whether your name is Jannik Sinner, or a guy like Daniil Medvedev, maybe even Tommy Paul, who Alcaraz defeated in the quarterfinal, maybe even Taylor Fritz. There's plenty of guys that certainly could at least threaten the mantle and the throne of Alcaraz. But as we see fit, and as we see as of right this moment, if the trajectory of this guy's career is going to be nothing but finals, nothing but majors, and health is going to play an enormous part of this. This guy, let's say over the course of the next 10 years, till he's 31, and with 40 more major tournaments ahead of him, if he's going to be healthy for all of them, he could probably win at least 15 of those. And to add to the 4 he has now, that's 19. And that's at 31, where when you look at guys like Djokovic or Nadal or even Federer, who pushed the envelope to almost 40, he could get close to, if not surpass, Djokovic when it's all said and done. And Djokovic is currently at 24 all time as far as men's Grand Slam titles. So we talked about this when he won the French to a certain degree, and even more so last year when he beat Djokovic at Wimbledon. And granted, he is still very early in his career, 21 years of age, and understood that his prime is still about 6 or 7 years from this point. But based on what you saw, especially yesterday, and yes, you can talk about Djokovic despite the fact that he's still talented and on his best day, he could beat Alcaraz, no doubt. But obviously, yesterday was not his best day or his finest moment. And for Djokovic, we know that he is on the other side of that mountain. Slowly but surely going down. It's not as if it's precipitous, despite the fact that he got swept there at Wimbledon in the final. But I would think we're going to hear from Djokovic at some point throughout the rest of this year, obviously with one more Grand Slam ahead of him. But Djokovic, you got to give it up. He did fight and fought valiantly in that final set, although you could say for all intents and purposes that the match was over, considering that Alcaraz jumped off to a 2-love lead to start off the match. But Djokovic, who was great in the postgame, certainly as diplomatic and as classy as you could be. Now, you didn't see that a few days prior in the Holger Rune match when he took the microphone to the fans in the stands, which I could see and have seen a much younger Djokovic do. But he knows that Alcaraz is the guy. He knows that it is going to take everything and the kitchen sink to beat this kid, and just extolled the praises of Alcaraz in the post-match. And then, of course, Alcaraz did the same toward Djokovic and his camp. And also give it up for Djokovic having the meniscus surgery and to rebound the way he did and even to get to this point. And granted that in the quarterfinal, there was a not a disqualification. There was a withdrawal there from one of the players. So he was able to rest up there a little bit. But still, give him all the credit in the world at 37 years of age to come back from that meniscus and to play top-flight tennis over the course of 2 weeks, although falling short yesterday was nothing short of, I don't want to say miraculous, but was stupendous. And Alcaraz, again, there aren't any more flowers that I could throw at his feet or bouquets. Now we're going to have to wait and see at Flushing Meadow, who he already has won that tournament. The only tournament that he hasn't won to complete the career Grand Slam is the Australian, which obviously we'll have to wait till January. But for Alcaraz right now, he is the guy in tennis. He is the guy that everybody is going to shoot for. He is the one that certainly could really be a guy, unlike Djokovic, where at least he had his rivals in a one, Rafael Nadal and Roger Federer. Could Jannik Sinner be that guy? I think he could. Could even Daniil Medvedev or Andrei Rublev, Alexander Zverev? I think they're a tick below. Sinner is right there, maybe just a notch below Alcaraz at this point. And Djokovic, out of respect, he's still part of that top echelon. But to me, it's Alcaraz, Djokovic, Sinner, and then everybody else. And that's what you got there over the course of the last couple of days when it comes to the men's side there at Wimbledon. As far as the women's, we thought it was going to be Elena Rybakina as far as her losing or her tournament to lose. And certainly she did there in the semifinal against Barbora Krejcikova. I can't even pronounce her name. You know me with names, people. One more time. Krejcikova. Sometimes I can say it, just flows out of the lips, and there's other times I can't. But with Krejcikova, she was able to beat Rybakina in the semifinal, and Jasmin Paolini was able to do the same against Donna Vekic, who ended up beating, at the time, was a massive underdog. And we talked about Iga Świątek. That was last week, where Vekic had this nice run to get herself to a semifinal. And Paolini, in beating Vekic, was able to get to a final back-to-back, losing to the French and then having a shot to go up against Krejcikova. There you go. Krejcikova. One more time. Krejcikova. I think I got it here, people. So for Krejcikova then to face off against Paolini, Paolini looking to see if she could seal the deal, unlike she did at the French Open. And Krejcikova got off to a good start, getting that first set, and then having for Paolini to regroup there a little bit. And Paolini, in doing so, taking that break, was able to get the second set and did a very good job in doing so. And now it was all going to be contingent on that final set where it was 3-3 and was anybody's match. Krejcikova looked like she was going to be on the ropes there, and who knew what was going to happen there with Paolini, if she was going to be able to outlast Krejcikova. There we go. Krejcikova. But for Paolini, even at 3-3, she double faulted, and from that point on, she lost her grasp on in that set and in the match as Krejcikova was able to win Wimbledon women's side, her second Grand Slam. I believe she won a U.S. Open 2021. I believe in the last 4 or 5 years. I should have known that off the top of my head. But for this Magic Carpet ride, Krejcikova, for her to get to a final and win, 31st ranked player in the world. She had been a top flight player throughout her career, taking a few steps back, few pegs. She had been knocked down the rankings there as far as the women go. But for Krejcikova, for her to get to this point, to win a Wimbledon, I'm sure it's a thrilling moment. As we all know, Wimbledon is the biggest tennis Grand Slam of all. And for her to get that under her belt, I don't know how that's going to translate to the French, because as we all know, between Swiatek and Goff, and we would think Rybakina, Sabalenka, who had to withdraw with that shoulder, among many other tennis players there on the tour for the women's side, it's going to be wide open. And congratulations not only to Krejcikova, but also to Alcaraz as well, as the third Grand Slam is already in the books. And overall, it was, I don't know, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. To have Swiatek go out, and the women's side was pretty much, I don't want to say in disarray. I don't want to go as far as that and knock it to that extent. But it was definitely a surprise how the women's side unfolded with Goff out and all the other players that I mentioned, and for the final to be what it was. And that's not a knock on Krejcikova or even Jasmin Paolini, who has certainly been very good and competitive here in these last two major tournaments. But certainly, I'm sure for the tennis fan, they probably enjoyed it and loved it. But for the casual fan, I'm sure they didn't rally around the women's side. And for the men's, it was pretty much chalk, as we know. And you got the final that you wanted. Maybe you didn't get the thrilling aspect. You didn't get the 5-set thriller that I'm sure a lot of people would have been riveted by. So overall, the tournament was more of a miss than it was a hit. I will say that. But you got a big-time champion there on the men's side. And on the women's side, another shocker with last year, Marketa Vondrousova, and then now with Krejcikova. So you just got to take these tournaments as they come. And yes, they can all be thrillers. They can all be classics. But one that we'll now move away from as we set our sights to the latter part of August, where the final Grand Slam, obviously the U.S. Open, will begin at that time. All right, now let me get into the batter's box, go into what's happening with the world of baseball, and I'm going to take a big picture look right now as the break is here. We had the draft yesterday, the futures game, I believe it was on Saturday. But the draft, you had the number one pick. First time a second baseman was picked first overall in the Major League Baseball draft, which I understand they're trying to generate some juice. They're trying to have the NFL and NBA feel for the pomp and circumstance. And listen, they're going to have a buildup many years in the making in order for this to be anything near the stratosphere of the National Football League or the association. That's all there is to it. Unless you're going to get a guy similar to Bryce Harper or Alex Rodriguez or Ken Griffey Jr. that has so much hype and has to be on the cover back in the day of a Sports Illustrated, similar to what Bryce Harper was, being that chosen one out in Las Vegas, and him being portrayed as a guy that was at 15 years or maybe even 16 years of age going to be the face of baseball, which obviously he's had a long career, couple of MVPs, on his way to a Hall of Fame career. But for the baseball landscape, and let me even tell you who that number one pick is. Here I am talking about it, and next thing you know, it's like I'm ready to talk about the first half, quote unquote. Travis Bazzana, a kid that's coming out of Oregon State, big time hitter, and for him to be drafted number one by the Cleveland Guardians, and with the Guardians and how they played, and they're going to be a theme here in a moment, you will have to take a look and see whether or not Bazzana is going to be a guy that's going to be in the major leagues in the next couple of years to go along with Andres Jimenez in the middle of that diamond there by the lake there in Ohio. That we'll have to wait and see. But other than that, I can't really get into any of these other picks or any of these other players that were drafted that were guys that we're going to have to keep our eyes out for or is on your radar for somewhere next year or down the road that we could zero in on and take a look to see whether or not this player is going to be a top rank or top flight prospect in 2026, 27 and beyond. So that's what I got there with the draft. Nothing much. And with the home run derby tonight and the All-Star game, which I'll get to a little bit later on. But the first half of the year, how I look at this big picture is twofold. One, the American League, to me, is going to be intriguing for the second half of the season. National League, not so much. Although the wild card looks like it's going to be a Royal Rumble to the end. And even though it's not going to be sexy because you're going to have teams there that, although they're in the mix and a few games under 500, but we will probably not expect to be there when it comes to the latter part of August and into September. And I'm talking about the Reds, I'm talking about the Pirates, even the San Francisco Giants, although by reputation and what they've done throughout the last decade plus, but they're a team that, although in recent memory, other than the 107-win team of 2021 and what they did that year and losing to the Dodgers in the division series, they haven't done much since they won the 3 World Series dating back to the 2010s. But that is going to be fascinating considering you have 8 teams for 2 spots, which I'll get to in a moment. But for the American League, obviously the AL East is up for grabs. We saw what happened there over the weekend where the Yankees were this close from not only sweeping the Orioles, they already got their first series win in a month when they won in Kansas City, so they were able to get that off the snide and at least feel a little bit better about going into the All-Star break. But that loss, where they had a 5-3 lead, actually they were down 3-2 in the ninth. Ben Rice, Craig Kimbrell, I know the Oriole fan, they do not want to see this guy in the ninth inning, and rightfully so, but gives up a 3-run homer after walking 2 guys to Ben Rice, who is looking like Lou Gehrig all of a sudden. And for the Yankees to go up 5-3 there in the ninth inning, looking for a sweep to get first place back and feel even tremendously better about themselves. Clay Holmes spits the bit, and Holmes, who is obviously not the guy, I get it, he's going to be the closer for this team, but if I'm a Yankee fan, this guy's going to have me shaking in my boots. And for Clay Holmes and what he did in the first 6 weeks of the season where he didn't give up a run, boy, have the mighty fallen, and could you even call him mighty? I don't think so. But he should have come away with a save there, and Anthony Volpe at 5-3 had a routine grounder right in his mitts, and he dropped it, a run scored, 2 outs, the inning extended, and then Cedric Mullins hits a fly ball to left field to where Alex Verdugo took a couple of steps in. Bad job there as the ball sailed over into his head and right to the outfield wall, where the Orioles got the 2 runs. They win the game 6-5. They are still in first place. They were able to get out of Dodge with a salvage of the final game and still will have control of first place heading into the weekend next Friday, where the season will resume. And that is going to be a fight to the very finish, as we know. And just for the record, the Yankees and Orioles have already played 10 of the 13 games. And you're not going to see these 2 teams meet up until the penultimate series of the regular season. Meaning that they will invade Yankee Stadium, the Orioles that is, the final week of the season leading into the final series. So it's the next to last series where you're going to see Baltimore invade the Bronx for those 3 games, which will surely be huge games if obviously they're going to be within a game, 2, or even 3 games of the division. So that's something to keep in mind there. As far as the AL Central, can the Twins do anything to be a threat to the Guardians? The Guardians, who have the best record in the American League by percentage points, and they have games in hand with the Orioles for that top spot. But can the Guardians continue their success, continue to play well? Or can the Twins, who won the division last year, consider to be a team that could overtake the Guardians when it's all said and done? I think they can, based on what they did last year, and I don't know if they're going to get any reinforcements by the time we get to the trade deadline, which is 2 weeks from tomorrow, I might add. So it looked like it was going to be a 1-team race where the Guardians had a 7.5 game lead as early as about 3 weeks ago, and now that the Twins, I don't want to say they're within striking distance, they are, I believe, 4 games back, maybe 5 in a loss. Let me pull that up real quick. But for the Twins, they're certainly in the mix here as far as not only the division, but also for a wild card position. So you're going to have to include them here when it comes to the AL race over the summer. And as I pull up the standings here, the Twins are 5 in the loss, like I mentioned, and 4.5 back of the division, which I would think that they want to have their sights set on as opposed to a wild card. So we'll take a look at that. And then the AL West. I know I had thrown dirt on the Astros about a month ago, and here they are after losing 2 or 3 to the Rangers, who saved face. I talked about them on Thursday, that they had to win 2 out of 3 against the Astros in order to be in this race, because if they would have got swept or even lost 2 out of 3, they would have been a game back or further back from the Astros. And with the Mariners, who had an awful weekend, Seattle had a 4-game set in Anaheim. They won 11-0 on Thursday night, and the rest of the weekend, they already started their All-Star break because they got swept from Friday through Sunday. They lose 3 out of 4, and now the Astros are just 1 game back in the division, and they're actually tied in the loss. Seattle 52-46, the Astros 50-46, and then you have the Rangers 46-50. I get it that they're 4 in the loss and 5 games back of the front-running Mariners. So we certainly can't put the Rangers out to pasture, although I was ready to do so if they had a bad weekend against the Houston Astros, right up there or right in the same state. So for the AL, it is going to be a crazy, and we would think it is going to be a fight to the finish on whether or not this American League, whether it's in the division, wild card race, not so much, because how I look at the wild card race, it is going to be broken down like this. As I pull up the wild card standings here, if you could just bear with me for a second. The wild card in the American League, as of right this moment, you're going to have the Yankees, who currently are there, and I get it, they're just a smidge behind the Orioles, but it's the Yankees or whomever's out of the AL East, they're going to have that 4th spot. Then you have the Twins, Red Sox, followed by the Royals, Astros, and then you want to say the Rays, who are at 500 at 48-48, and they're 5.5 back. Anything south of that in the wild card race, forget about it. So I'm going to give the Rays because they are at 500, and they had a good weekend against the Guardians where they won 2 out of 3 in their ballpark. The Rays, that is. They won those games at home. So that's how your American League is going to shape up. I think the divisions in the AL East and West are going to be compelling and riveting, to say the least. And if the Twins have a push on the Guardians, you could also look at the race there, which is going to be important because when you're looking at who's going to get the 1 and 2 seed, you would think it's going to come out of the AL East and the AL Central, unless somebody from the AL West is going to have a push or a say in that race. But I think it's going to be crazy when we take a look at how the American League is going to shape up, not only with the divisions, but with the top end of the wild card. And as far as the National League goes, the divisions in the NL East and the NL West are a wrap, as we know, because the Phillies have a sizable lead, as well as the Dodgers have a sizable lead on the Padres, and the Phillies over the Braves for that matter. Phillies right now, with the most wins in the sport, they're 62-34, have an 8-game lead, 8.5 in the standings over the Braves. Dodgers 56-41 with a 7-game lead over the Diamondbacks, who've actually played a little bit better and are a game over 500. And the Padres 50-49, although the Diamondbacks are percentage points ahead of the Padres, but with the Padres having more wins, but they played more games, that's where the advantage goes to the D-backs. But for the Central, let's talk about them. The Brewers and Cardinals. Yes, I know that the Cardinals are 4 games back at 4.5. I don't know if I trust the Cardinals 100% unless they make a move or two at the deadline, which could be huge if they're going to be a threat to the Brewers. And not to say that the Brewers are world beaters by any stretch, but considering that they've been in first place pretty much since the start of the season, and I expect them to stay there. But Brewers-Cardinals, that could be a race. I'm not going to look at the Pirates, Reds, or even the Cubs for that matter as far as a threat to the division, more so in the wild card, which I'll get to in a moment. But the divisional races right now are an afterthought in the East and the West. In the Central, I still think the Brewers will be in good stead when it's all said and done. And now as we look at the wild card, which is just bananas, 8 teams for 2 spots. I mean, think about that. Now, granted, a lot of those teams are either at 500 or under 500. When you look at the Diamondbacks, who are a game over 500 and are 1 game back of the Mets, who have the 3rd playoff spot in the National League. And then you have the Padres, who are also a game over 500, as I discussed. Pirates with a good weekend, sweeping the White Sox. I get it that that's small potatoes, but still, you beat the teams that are in front of you. And I'll get to the Pirates in a second, in this particular with Paul Skeens. 48 and 48, and then is there a drop-off after that? Absolutely. But the reason why I include these teams is because of how far back they are from the wild card race. The Giants are 47 and 50, 3 games under 500, but they're 3 games back of the Mets for that final wild card spot. Then you have the Reds, who are tied with the same record with the Giants, 3 back. The Cubs, 47 and 51, 3.5 back of the Mets for the wild card spot. You have those teams who shouldn't be in any discussion when it comes to being in this NL wildcard playoff mix, but I have to throw them in here because when you're 3 and 3.5 back, they're still part of this discussion, which is even absurd to bring up. So with these 8 teams, and I'm talking about Cardinals, because the Braves are going to be fine. They have a 3.5 game lead over the Cardinals, and the Mets are just a half game behind the Cardinals for the second wild card spot. But where you have Cardinals, Mets, Diamondbacks, Padres, Pirates, Giants, Reds, Cubs. I'm not going to include the Nationals. They are 6 back. But you have all these teams jumbled in the pot to see who could come out come October as part of the final 6, or at least the final 3 or 2 wildcard teams in the National League. I'll say this right now. Unless there's going to be some major reinforcements going on, whether it's the Cubs, and we know that the Ricketts family, they may make a move here, or who knows, they may even sell. Then you have the Reds, same deal. Well, their front office, who is cheap as hell, and their owner, he's a curmudgeon. Whether or not they're going to make a move, I don't know if I'm going to see that. Maybe they'll make a small move for a reliever or a 5th starter, but that's not going to move the needle as far as them being a threat in the playoff mix. And the Giants, maybe they'll make a move. Who knows? But again, knowing that the Pirates, who are ahead of them, and they have very good pitching, maybe they'll get another bat there, which I think they need to go along with guys like Ke'Bryan Hayes and Brian Reynolds and guys like that. And then you have the Padres, who I think they're still going to be a threat here, considering their talent and what they're capable of doing. And the Diamondbacks are the National League champions, defending their crown from last year, to go along with the Mets and Cardinals. So I can see this is going to be, like I said, a battle royale to the very finish, although I would expect teams to start falling off here. The aforementioned bottom rung, Giants, maybe even Pirates, Reds, and teams like that. But that is your first half overall picture. And you're going to have a guy like Paul Skeens, who's going to start the All-Star game tomorrow night in Arlington. And this is one of the reasons why baseball 2024, and with the way the analytics are and all of the reading the iPad and not the eye test, for Paul Skeens in Milwaukee to go 7 innings, 99 pitches, I understand, to have a no-hitter, could he at least start the 8th inning? Is there any wrongdoing for him to go out there, toe to rubber, to throw pitch 100 and see what happens here? If he walks the first guy on 4 pitches, or if he walks him on 5 pitches where he's way out of the strike zone, you want to pull him then? All right, I'll give you that, because he's at 104 and now he's going to have some stressful pitches, despite the fact that he's 22 years of age. And I get it that this is the most that he's pitched, especially in the major league level, and you got to worry about his arm and his future, etc. Innings limits, okay. But start the inning. Just start it. If he gives up a hit, pull him. If he walks the guy, pull him. Fine. But if he mows down that leadoff hitter, where it's good morning, good afternoon, good night, don't you think he deserves that next hitter at 102 pitches? Why not? And I understand people can say, well, JAYREELZ, you don't know the health of this player. You're not a pitching coach. You're not a manager. You're nowhere near Milwaukee or a major league field. But I've watched baseball my whole life. And yes, this is baseball in 2024. This is why it's turned off a lot of people who've even watched baseball for a majority of their lives, or whatever it may be. Just start the inning. Nobody's saying he has to go through the 8th. Nobody's saying that if he gives up a hit or a walk, no, he has to face that next batter. Nobody is saying that. But if he gets a quick out, or if he is able to get a 3-pitch strikeout and he's at 102, maybe that limit will go to 110. Or what if he has a clean inning and he throws 7 pitches? And I get it, they probably wouldn't put him out there for the 9th if that was the case, which even would have been more of an absurdity or even a travesty when it comes to the sport. But this is why fans can't wrap their arms around baseball, because you got a young guy, looks like a guy who's a future stud, and he's already a stud now, but a guy who looks like he's going to be banking Cy Youngs year after year, and hopefully he stays a lifelong Pirate. Let's throw that in the mix too. But for the fans to be robbed of an opportunity to see him go out there, to see how he would at least perform in that first at-bat in the 8th inning, to see whether or not he could preserve a no-hitter or if he gives it up. Now, we will never ever get to see that or witness or experience it, because 99 pitches, that's it. And it's just sad, because this is baseball in 2024, how if this was 10 years ago, he would have probably told the rubber to start that 8th inning. And now we'll never see that, whether it's with Skeens or any other pitcher for that matter. Look at Ronel Blanco, who threw a no-hitter on April Fool's Day, threw 7 no-hit innings about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And what did that get him? He got pulled, I believe, with 94 pitches. And there's a guy who threw a no-hitter early in the year. So that's what we got there with baseball, people. So that's Skeens and what's gone on there. Now, as far as the weekend goes, what else can I pull from this past weekend? I know the Royals, they won a game, so good job by them. They did lose 2 out of 3 at Fenway, but they didn't get embarrassed. Red Sox didn't go in there, or I should say the Royals didn't go in there and get swept in Beantown. So that was a decent job by the Kansas City Royals, although they did lose the back 2, I believe, of that series. And yes, they did. So they couldn't get another after winning the game on Friday night. So that's something just to keep in mind as far as what they did. And other than that, yeah, that's all I got. I know you had some crazy games over the weekend where, how about that game on Saturday with the Tigers and Dodgers? The Dodgers had a 9-4 lead in the 9th inning, and they gave up 5 runs in the bottom of the 9th, and then they topped it off with a Gio Urshela walk-off in the 10th, and then won the game yesterday to win the series and take 2 out of 3 against the Dodgers. And the Dodgers at 56-41, I'm sorry. They have underachieved big time. And I get it, they've had Mookie Betts out, and Yamamoto hasn't been in the rotation. He's been out for some time, and the team, Tyler Glasnow out. They're not whole. I get that. But this team should be a lot better than what their record indicates. And I understand they've had their moments this year, and they've shown that they're going to win a division in their sleep. But I get it. It's the middle of July, and it's not October. But I don't know if this is going to bode well for this Dodger team. Maybe they need to play some meaningful games. Maybe they need to have their team whole and take it from there to see whether or not that we can really grade this team on a whole. But I tell you, this Dodger team, I'm not going to say it scares me, but based on their recent track record in this postseason, post-pandemic World Series win, this would scare me if I'm a Dodger fan. And then you had the A's also win 2 out of 3 in Philadelphia, and yesterday hit 8 home runs in that launching pad there at Citizens Bank, and they won 18-3. I know no sweat for the Phillies. It would have been good for them to close out the first half at 63-33, which would have put them at 30 games over 500, which would have been fantastic, and I believe would have been the best break record or record at the break for a Philly team. And they've shown their muscle and their mettle. Now they have to go back to a World Series and win it, which they went to a World Series, as we know, 2 years ago and fell short, blowing those 2 games at home up 3-2 against Arizona in the NLCS. And then lastly, before I move on to other things, I know I didn't talk about Wander Franco the other day. I spared you guys that, so I'm just going to bring this up for about 60 seconds. On the restricted list of Major League Baseball, meaning he's not getting paid, so he went from the administrative list to the restricted after the charges in the Dominican Republic with the sexual abuse and the welfare of a minor, the 14-year-old girl, which is alleged and now being charged. And who knows what's going to happen. We all know that, I'm sure that's career suicide for him. And we're not going to see him, obviously, the rest of this year. Who knows what this means for next year. I would think Major League Baseball, they're going to hand down a suspension at some point. I don't know if they're going to continue to wait to the end of the season where they could get the full investigation and the complete story on Franco to then put, I would think, minimum a 1-year ban. Who knows? That's just me speculating from afar. But Franco, as we talked about this last year around this time, and now you can forget about him as far as gracing a diamond at any point this year and beyond. But we shall see, as Franco is certainly going to be put on ice for quite some time there as far as his career goes. Now, as far as the Home Run Derby and All-Star Game, as now we're at the break, I'll get into the second half, quote-unquote, on Thursday's podcast, unpack that, go over the schedule, things of that nature, as I look into my crystal ball to see what will transpire, what could transpire over the last 60-some-odd games of this Major League Baseball season. So that'll come on Thursday, Thursday's rendition of the pod. So for the Home Run Derby tonight, I know Pete Alonso, and kudos to him, because he's won back-to-back, and I understand this is his claim to fame. Now, he did win a Rookie of the Year and has the all-time home run record for a rookie, 53, and has certainly displayed his power throughout the course of the first 5.5 years of his career. But let's face it, his claim to fame is this Home Run Derby. I know this is his time to shine. I know maybe he probably overblows his stay here, considering he's won it twice. He lost the third time in a row. I believe he did win it back-to-back. And for him to show up again, I got to give him credit. But Alonso has not had a good year for his standards. Yes, he has 19 home runs, and he's on a pace to hit a little bit less than 40. Last year he hit 46. Just put that in perspective. And he's going into a walk year, I might add. And I don't want to kill Alonso. He's on the Mets, my favorite team. And one more time, I will say kudos, because guys like Aaron Judge and Bryce Harper, who have been there once and maybe twice, have said, been there, done that. But for whatever the reason, Alonso likes it. Now, I think maybe it's at a point where, okay, this could be his last go-around. I would think this should be it for him. There's nothing more to prove. He's won it twice. He performed another time and lost. And maybe this is his day to shine, considering he's not having a great year. Who knows? Maybe it's more of an ego thing on his part because he's been there, done that, won it twice. Hopefully, if he does win it this time around, raise the trophy above your head. That's it. Don't come out with any medallions or flexing muscles or doing anything like that. It's a home run derby, Pete. At the end of the day, nobody really cares. Yes, you could say he's been a multiple home run derby champion, but only on the night of the derby, that's when anybody will even think back on who's won it in the past. Other than that, sadly and truthfully, nobody really cares. So that's what I have with the Home Run Derby, although it's a little bit more exciting than the All-Star Game, because that has just fallen flat on its face over the years. A lot of these games are like 4-2, 5-3. You don't have thrilling offensive type games. It's almost as if the guys show up, they tip their cap during the introductions, and they just want to leave and go home. Certainly, unlike yesteryear, where it was National League and American League, players didn't cross over because of free agency. You knew that who was going to be in the National League All-Star team year in and year out, where this time around you have, 30-some-odd first-timers, which is good for the sport and good for the young players. But, again, you don't have the just year in and year out. When you knew that the All-Star Game was going to have Joe Morgan, Pete Rose, Mike Schmidt, Johnny Bench. I mean, those were mainstays year in and year out. I know I'm dating myself going back to the 70s. Or even in the 80s, you knew Keith Hernandez, Darryl Strawberry, Gary Carter. I understand those are Mets, but Carter was an all-star even when he was a Montreal Expo. American League, guys who were there year in, year out. Reggie Jackson. I mean, I can even go further. The Harmon Killebrews, the Al Kalines, guys like that. Fred Lynn, Jim Rice, you name it. Guys that were just mainstays in the All-Star Game. And now, half of the guys you can't even pick out of a lineup. So, and I understand they've also expanded the rosters too. I get it. But to me, the game is a shell of its old self. And as funny as it'll be to say this, it's the best All-Star game out of all of them. Forget about the Pro Bowl. I mean, don't even go there with that. NBA All-Star game, it's Matador defense. The first to 200 wins. That's just all you need to know about the NBA. NHL, with their weird formats of 3-on-3, I get it. They try to attract more fans, whatever, but more of a gimmick, not the same. For Major League Baseball to have the best All-Star game, that is not saying much, considering how just bad the game has been. It goes by in a blink of an eye. And one more time, nobody really cares. So that's what I have with baseball. And like I said, come Thursday, we'll talk more about what to look for in the second half, go through the schedule, upcoming, etc. And I'll even go through my over-unders, which are not looking good right now. I'll just give you a quick hint. I'm looking at 500, which is nothing to even go crazy about, but it could be 2-4. I'll explain more on Thursday's pod. All right, now let me get to a couple of other things before I bid adieu. NBA, as I lace up the high tops there, and Jalen Brunson, who has become the darling of the Knicks fan, the apple of their eye, a guy that was or is a hero of the team, and now you could just pretty much put a cape and an S on his chest because he is literally a superhero in New York. He signed an extension a year early, I might add, where next year he could have got his 5-year, $280 million Supermax. But for Brunson to sign 4 years, $156 million because he wanted to give the team, some flexibility when it comes to signing, whether it's current players on the team or bringing other players in to improve the roster and give the Knicks a shot at the Celtics and at an Eastern Conference final and get to an NBA final, which is commend him 1,000%. I don't know how many other players in the sport would do that. And no, I'm not talking about LeBron that, I'm going to sign 2 years for $104 million because I'm not going to sign for that third year to give you flexibility. No. We're not talking about that. We're talking about a guy who's leaving $113 million on the table and is a huge and enormous gamble for Jalen Brunson to do so. And that's twofold. One, because if he could have waited a year and signed that money, he would have had $280 million no matter if he gets hurt, tears a knee, is banged up, is a shell of his old self, doesn't matter. But no, as selfless as he was or is, decided that, you know what, I don't care. $156 million is still more than I could ever dream of or ever imagine, and kudos to him. But now the flip side of that is that you have to wonder, as small in stature that he is, and no, he's not Tiny Archibald or Muggsy Bogues, but for a guy who has been nicked up here, and we've seen this with small guys, whether it's Allen Iverson, and I get it, he's had a lot of injuries that he nursed throughout the course of his career and didn't really lose a bulk of time due to injury, and that's kudos to his freakishness as an athlete and the body that he had and going into the paint against the Shaqs of the world and guys like that. So that's why AI is a legend. But even a guy like Isaiah Thomas, and no, not the Pistons Isaiah Thomas, but the Celtics version where he was a guy that small in stature, 5'9", he took it to the rack. He was able to beat his man off the dribble, pull up from three, etc. But we saw how his career unfolded with the hip injury and other nagging injuries where he was unable to get that big payday. And granted, he was on a track to get that prior to him being traded to Cleveland in that Kyrie deal. And because he was not anything close to what he was with the Celtic, I believe he was a second team All-NBA in 2016-17. And for him to not even come close to that and not get the big payday, blah, blah, blah. Let me get this right here, JAYREELZ. For him to not get that big payday that Brunson could be foregoing and risking. Now, granted, I understand that Isaiah Thomas didn't sign anything close for 4 years at $156 million. And for Brunson, he's looking at that as if he is making $280 million, and kudos to him. But this is a big risk reward, obviously for Brunson first and foremost. But then now let's get to the even third layer of this, the Knicks. All right, you can re-sign Mikal Bridges. Now, Bridges, I know everybody went gaga over that trade from the Brooklyn Nets and the Knicks sending all those number one future first-round picks to Brooklyn. But they look at Bridges as a guy that is a first-team All-NBA player that you're bringing in a young Kevin Durant here to the team as a final piece of this puzzle. He is not. So let's start there. Now, you're going to extend Bridges now based on what Brunson did for the team, which is good. But I think the Knicks are still that one championship piece away, whether it's a guy who's won a title, a la Klay Thompson, which would have been a good fit, maybe not for the Knicks, but knowing his pedigree, a guy who could score, a guy who's won championships and knows his way around a locker room that if for whatever the reason Not to say it's going to be fractured or if it's going to go awry, but he is a type of person and the caliber of a champion that could rally the troops to say, guys, this is how we conduct a championship level team. We can't go in different directions, or we can't just say things to the media or do things this way or do things that way. If we're going to win, it has to be done this way. They don't have a guy like that in their locker room. And for the Knicks to have this flexibility, you would think they're going to be wise enough to bring in a guy like that. Who that guy is, I don't know. Now, they still have Julius Randle, which I talked about when they brought in Bridges. Randle's a guy that when he has the ball, it's going to be ISO or nothing else. And that could stunt the growth of this Knicks team when you already have 4 Villanova guys who played in college and now going to be on the same team. And who knows if they're going to try to push that agenda toward a guy like Randle. Not to say they're going to purposely do that, but you can read the writing on the wall. And if Randle's going to be part of a piece that's going to be dangled in a trade to bring back a contract that's going to be of his ilk, and maybe even a little bit more to where, dare I even say Kevin Durant? Not that I'm speculating, and who knows if this is going to be aggregated, but that would be a trade that the Knicks would have to make if they're going to bring back a guy who knows his way around winning, who knows his way around winning championships, and on top of that could be that guy that could say, all right, get on my back because this is the way to get that brass ring that the Knicks fan has been starving and coveting for over 50 years. So, one more time, kudos to Brunson, kudos to doing what he did, and for the Knicks to now have this flexibility, but where do they go, other than signing Bridges, of course, and maybe even dangling Randle at some point between now and the start of training camp to bring back a guy like that? That remains to be seen. And I don't know if Randle's going to be on this team. And I know Knicks fans can get at me all they want. Oh, Randle's going to be on this team. Come on, look at the 5 that we have there with Randle and Bridges, Brunson, Hart. Well, Hart's going to come off the bench, as we know. DiVincenzo, that. I get it. But Randle, if he's healthy, can be a big-time player on this team. But let's see how he's going to mesh with those guys. And if he's going to want to get his points, if he's going to sacrifice and put that aside for the greater good of the team, is Randle going to do that? Can't guarantee that. This isn't a scenario, I got to throw my Celtics in the mix now. This isn't a scenario where Jason Tatum, Jalen Brown, and those guys, even Al Horford, they knew they had to sacrifice. They knew that they had to either sacrifice minutes, sacrifice shot attempts, know that, hey, I can't chuck 100 threes, that maybe my passing and assist a la Jason Tatum in Game 5 and what he did, where he didn't shoot a lot of threes because the three wasn't dropping, so let me attack the basket, which he got a lot of points in the paint. And then what he was unable to see, he was able to pass it. Can Julius Randle take some of what Jason Tatum was taking in order for the Knicks to reach heights that have not been seen in a half a century? That's my point. And let's see what we got else with the NBA. I think that's it before I move on. NBA. Oh, do I even need to get into this, people? The league. I don't know why they decided to do this a couple of days ago, but the NBA has now unveiled the group draws for the 2024 NBA Cup on July 13th. Seriously? Like, anybody is going to have their antenna up to take the lay of the land as to who the group draws for the NBA Cup, which starts, I believe, November 12th or whatever it is. You have got to be kidding. No one cares about that. If anybody thinks that the NBA Cup is something that any NBA fan, any diehard sports fan, any casual sports fan, or even the most casual NBA fan, you think they're going to pay attention to that in the middle of July? That, oh, let me see what teams will break it down to see what's going to happen for the NBA Cup. Let me ask LeBron James on this day, oh, that banner that you raised in the latter part of December, how much do you care about that banner? Or even if they gave out rings for that, which I talked about at that time. You think LeBron cares about that stupid or silly NBA Cup? And if he does, I'd be shocked. Because if he's going to group that with the 4 rings that he has as a player, the 2 in Miami, 1 in Cleveland, and the 1 that he got in LA, you could talk about that being a ghost ring because that was in the bubble and had no parade, no celebration. But anyway, I digress. For the NBA to put that out a couple of days ago, please. They should have waited till the week of the start of the NBA season. Or maybe the day of, when the curtain will be raised on the NBA season and say, hey guys, the NBA Cup is a month from now. Here are the group draws. I understand you're like, oh, please, all right, what are they? But at least you're going to get a look at it. Between now and the start of the season, not only are people going to forget, but for those who were put on notice, they have already forgotten. So that's what I have to say about that. Nothing in the NHL. That's been quiet on the Western Front. There's nothing really to unwrap there for the second time in a row. I know some small signings, but nothing really to sink your teeth into. Now, finally, with the NFL, some sad news that I have to report, where you had a couple of passings here over the last few days. The first one being Monte Kiffin. He, the architect of the Tampa 2 defense, the guy that pretty much built that Tampa defense, which was led by Derek Brooks, Warren Sapp, John Lynch, Rondé Barber, at first with Tony Dungy, and then with John Gruden, where they won their Super Bowl 37 in San Diego against the Oakland Raiders. And of course, have had a long career, most recently with his son, Lane Kiffin, at Ole Miss. Was even a coordinator there going back to 2020. Passes away the other day at the age of 84. And a guy that, again, will be remembered. Is he a guy that will, I believe he's probably in the Hall of Fame, come to think of it, as a coordinator. And for what he did there in Tampa, certainly will not be forgotten in that region for what he was able to do. That Tampa defense was stout. You could rank them top 10 all time, especially when they won a Super Bowl that year. I don't think they're the steel curtain of the 70s or the 85 Bears or the 2000 Ravens. I think they're a cut below that. Maybe you want to rank them 5th or 6th all time. There could be a team that's 4th that you could probably squeeze or sandwich in between that Tampa defense and the aforementioned top 3. But for Monte Kiffin, thoughts, prayers, condolences go out to the Kiffin family, the NFL, college football, Ole Miss, Tampa, etc., as he transitions to the next stage or to the afterlife at the age of 84 years old. And then you had, shockingly, on, I believe, Saturday night, but the news came out Sunday morning, Jacoby Jones, wide receiver, kick returner, returned a kickoff in the Super Bowl right after the Beyonce halftime. And remember, they had that long pause, 34 minutes there because of the lights that went out. And a lot of that probably attributed to Beyonce's halftime show. But he returned a kick 108 yards. The longest play in Super Bowl history. Had that kickoff, and I believe it was 24-7, if I'm not mistaken. And that made it 31-7, or maybe it was 21-7 and made it 28. Something along the lines of that. He also caught a touchdown in that game. The only player to do so, to catch a touchdown and to return a kickoff in a Super Bowl. Also had that crazy catch in the divisional round during that Super Bowl run against the heavily favored Denver Broncos, to where on a 3rd and 30, Jacoby Jones got behind Chris Harris, caught that pass at mile high with 20-something seconds to go, pushed the game into overtime. It was actually double overtime before they got the game-winning kick. And Jones was a part of that. Was also a part of that famous play on Thanksgiving up the sideline with Mike Tomlin standing there looking at the Jumbotron, and literally Jacoby Jones whizzing right past him, literally inches from Tomlin there in the sideline. And later on had a cup of coffee with the Steelers, and Tomlin had some nice words to say about Jones. Also played for the Houston Texans, died at the age of 40, the cause of the death unknown. And a guy who, listen, won a Super Bowl, obviously had a couple of plays there in that run, which will be remembered in Baltimore Raven history. And way too soon for him to just perish and pass. And it goes back to what I said at the very top, people. And I'll tie this in first with Jones. Thoughts, prayers, condolences go out to his family, the Ravens, Texans, even Steelers for that matter, for the short time he was in Pittsburgh. And just a tough loss. One more time, 40 years of age. Like I mentioned at the top, this summer is flying by, people. 7 weeks ago, it was Memorial Day, and here we are breaking out the pom-poms for the unofficial beginning of summer. And 7 weeks from today will be Labor Day, the unofficial ending of summer. And I get it that it's going to zoom right by. It's already July 15th. Before you know it, it's going to be the trade deadline in baseball. It's going to be August 1st. You're going to get to the middle of August. And then we're going to be talking college football and preseason football. Before you know it, it'll be the start of both college and pro football. And then Labor Day will be here. And we're going to be talking about sweatpants, long jackets, and pumpkin lattes. But with all that being said, and in all seriousness, no matter how fast the summer goes, be in the moment, people. Be present. Be around the people you love. Take personal inventory. Do what's right by you. Do what's right in your heart, mind, body, soul, spirit. Be kind to others. Be kind to yourself. I get it that if you're having a rough day, it's okay. And if you're having a great day, even better. But we know happiness is fleeting. We're all trying to find that state of content. And as long as you look from within and ask yourself those tough questions and try to find personal inventory, take personal inventory and try to find some self-discovery through a lot of exploration, and in those boring moments, stay away from the devices, go for a long walk, do whatever it takes to find that path in order for you to find and unlock that state of content, because that's where life is really going to blossom in front of your very eyes, and find the path that's going to lead you in that direction, as opposed to just leaving you stagnant and wishing days away on a Monday, wishing it was already Friday, wishing that you're going on that vacation, which is 22 days away as you're starting to count it down off the calendar. Don't do that, people. Live in the moment, stay present, be around the people that you love, your friends, your family, the loved ones, because it all goes by in a snap, and it is way too precious. And just take Jones's case, even Larry Allen, what we saw there a few weeks ago on vacation with his family, perishing, dying. And I can't stress it enough, people. Just live in the moment, enjoy it, and enjoy the rest of the summer, because we do not get this time back. So if there's anything that you could take away from this little commentary over the last couple of minutes, is please just do that. Live for today, no matter how good or how bad life is. Just live, try to find and seek those answers, and just go on with what's going on in your heart and between your ears, and do the best you can moving forward. With that being said, another episode in the books. It's going to be challenging here because yours truly is going to pivot, as I'm going to be traveling, but I'm going to take all my equipment with me. I'll be in a different location come Thursday, and even next week for that matter, which I'll get into on Thursday's podcast. But as always, thank you so much for stopping by, carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about what goes on in the world of sports. If you haven't done so, subscribe, rate, review, throw me a few stars, write a review on your favorite podcast platform. Of course, Apple, Spotify, JAYREELZ.com. One more time, OLIPOP, people. It's summer. You got to quench your thirst. You got to stay cool. Go to drinkolipop.com, save 15% off by using the promo code JAYREELZ at checkout. Trust me, I have some in my refrigerator. I love tropical punch. Banana cream, what? That's a very good flavor, but if you're not into doing something different, you still have cola, you have ginger ale, you have cream, you have orange, you have grape. Those classic flavors that you remember as a kid will certainly quench that thirst on a hot summer day. So please go to their website, drinkolipop.com, and use the promo code JAYREELZ for 15% off at checkout. I would greatly appreciate it, as I get a kickback from that. The YouTube channel, always vibrant, always direct and in effect, at JAYREELZ, with content there every day. And if you want to hit me up with a question, comment, suggestion, you can do so at the following: on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JAYREELZ Podcast, Twitter, X, JAYREELZ1, just a number. Of course, on YouTube at JAYREELZ, and the old-fashioned way, the JAYREELZ Podcast at gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals, because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to do, people. It's in the blood. It's in the DNA, as I like to say. Talking sports since birth, as I deliver nothing but fire, passion, energy, fury with my thoughts, excuse me, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JAYREELZ podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx to South Beach to South Central to South Pacific and all points beyond, peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JAYREELZ podcast, on the flip, baby.